Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar tonight. Tonight we're joined by Morven-May from the Lyme Disease UK, and we're going to be learning about how to prevent Lyme disease and be safe in our woodlands. So I'll pass over and let's take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me along tonight. It's really fantastic to see you all. So, as you heard, my name is Morven-May, and I'm one of the volunteers at Lyme Disease UK. And I'm also the author of Finding Joy and Keeping Joy. And although both those books are fictitious, they're based on my own experience of living with Lyme disease for the last 17 years. And I use those books in conjunction with Lyme Disease UK to raise awareness. So I do lots of talks all across the country to raise awareness, but I'm predominantly based in Scotland, so I'm based in the Highlands. So what we're going to do tonight is go through some slides with you, and then we will take some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them all. So can you give me a thumbs up or a wave or something to let me know the slides are working?
That's working, Morven-May.
Fantastic.
That looks good.
Perfect. See if they will. Oh, this is where the text playing up. It's not letting me move them on. 2 seconds. I'll see if I can redo this.
Off and on again. That's all I can offer you with IT glitches, I'm afraid, but it usually works.
Yeah, that's the one. It was working before, but we'll hopefully get it going again. Okay, let's see. Is it changing slides?
Yes, we're on what is Lyme disease.
Fantastic, brilliant. So the first slide is what is Lyme disease? And Lyme disease is caused by a corkscrew-shaped bacteria called Borrelia. And it's thought to be one of the most complex bacteria known to man. And I spend a lot of my days studying this illness, and the more I get to know about it, the more astonished I am by the intelligence behind this disease. So Lyme disease can be transmitted through a tick bite, but there is increasing evidence to show that it can be spread through other biting vectors such as mosquitoes and horseflies. So though we don't know that definitively yet, it's something to keep in the back of your mind. And as research progresses, hopefully we'll get definitive answers on that. So ticks can also carry other infections called co-infections, and these can range from anaplasma, babesia, and tick-borne encephalitis. So it's actually quite unusual to just get Lyme disease. You're far more likely to get Lyme disease and co-infections. So for example, I have Lyme disease, but I also have 3 co-infections on top of that. And this is one of the reasons that Lyme disease can be very, very difficult to treat, and makes it very, very challenging for people to overcome if it's not caught early. And that's why they also call ticks nature's dirty needle, because they carry more than one disease. And ticks are actually arachnids, they're not insects. They belong to the family of daddy longlegs and spiders, and they can be as small as poppy seeds, which is why we always say to people when you're checking yourself for ticks to feel your skin instead of just looking, because quite often what your eyes will overlook as being a speck of mud or being a mole or a freckle, your fingers will be able to detect that anomaly. So we always recommend that you feel your skin and don't just look at it. And for those of you who are sitting in front of your laptops, if you look down at your keyboard and find the full stop, that is how small a tick can be. They are absolutely minute. So that's why it's so important to be proactive in checking yourself for them. So this here is an example of the ticks throughout their different life cycle. So the smallest tick there is the larva, and then you get the nymph, which is the next stage up, and then the adult ticks. So you've got an example of the male and female ticks there. Those are the adults. And we've got it next to FIP just to show you just how tiny they can be. So this photo was sent in to us by a parent who had a tick bite on their toddler. And again, this is why it's so important to be checking your loved ones, because it's so easy to miss them. Ticks will migrate to various different areas of your body, but they like to go into places that are going to be or provide a good blood source. They're going to like areas that are damp and sweaty. So areas like your armpits, your groin, your toes, in your hair, these kind of areas are areas that ticks do like to migrate to. And this is another example that was sent in to us of a very small tick in between the fingers of someone's hand. So what is the risk of Lyme disease? Lyme disease can be found all over the UK, but there are without doubt certain hotspots for it. For example, like the Highlands, anywhere that there's going to be woodland, parkland, anywhere that's going to be dense in terms of undergrowth, you're going to be at an increased risk of catching Lyme disease and tick bites. But ticks can also be found in urban parks and even in people's gardens. So, for example, some places up in the Highlands, people actually can't hang their washing out because the ticks are so numerous within their gardens that they're finding crawling on the washing line. That's how bad it is in some places up in the Highlands. So although it's less likely to have them in your garden, there's still that risk. And apologies. Again, if you're living in sort of cities, you're still at risk of potentially getting tick bites. I know one person who lived in a huge tower block and caught tick from feeding the birds on their rooftop garden. So you really can be at risk anywhere. So it's really important to be vigilant, but especially in areas where you're going to be in dense woodland and where there's going to be dense undergrowth, because those ticks are definitely going to be there in far vaster numbers. And there used to be a myth that you could only get a tick bite and Lyme disease during spring and summer months because that's when the ticks were most active. But unfortunately, because we're having milder and milder winters, ticks are now active throughout the entire year. So unfortunately, we don't have that period of time where we had a bit of a respite. Unfortunately, ticks are active all year round, but without a doubt, they are most active spring and summer. And that is when people really do need to be at their most vigilant. And it was really interesting to learn that the Big Tick Project found that 1 in 3 dogs had a tick on them and their owners were unaware of this. Unfortunately, our pets are massive carriers of ticks, and that's why it's so important that we check not only ourselves and our children or loved ones, but we also check our pets because they will be bringing them into your home, potentially going to be up on your couch or on your bed, and those ticks could potentially drop off and then bite and infect you. Not only that, but your dogs can actually become quite unwell with Lyme disease, so it's something to be aware of. So how can you prevent getting Lyme disease? Prevention is far better than a cure, and we always recommend that you wear a repellent if you're out and about, and to look for one that specifically targets ticks, not just insects in general. You really do need to get one that looks for ticks and repels the ticks themselves. You can also get cloves that are embedded with a tick repellent. I know a lot of gamekeepers use them and they find them really, really helpful and find them very beneficial. They do come at quite a cost, but again, if you're going to be out and about all the time, it might well be worth you investing in that, because I can assure you, you don't want to get this disease. So we always encourage people as well to wear long sleeves and long trousers. And this is to reduce your exposure to, or sorry, to reduce your skin's exposure to come into contact with ticks. And we always recommend that you tuck trousers into your socks and into your trousers. And this is really important because this prevents the ticks from climbing up the inside of your clothes. It allows you to be able to spot them better as well. And to give an example of this, I recently went for a walk with my friend and we were going up a hill and I was in welly boots and I was covered in tick repellent and she didn't have anything. She was just in trainers and she had jeans on. And when we got back to the car, I said to her, let's just check ourselves. I know I'm being paranoid, but let's just check ourselves. And I was fine. And she checked herself and said, no, I'm fine. I haven't got anything on me. And I said, well, can we just roll up the ankle of your jeans just to make sure? And when she rolled up the ankle of her jeans, she had over 10 nymph ticks crawling up the inside of her legs. And she openly admitted that she would have been oblivious. She would have gone home, crawled into bed, stuck a movie on, and had a nice leisurely time and would have never known that they were there. So that small thing can make a really big difference. So I do really encourage you to tuck your clothes into themselves and to just check yourself when you come back from a walk, because she was being completely oblivious otherwise. And where possible, always stick to paths and avoid any overhanging grass or bracken or overgrowth in any way, because the way that ticks hunt is that they smell your breath and your sweat, and what they do is they quest. So what ticks do is they climb to the top of the blade of grass and they use their back legs to cling onto that blade of grass, and then they hang their front legs out like this, and they wait for you to brush past. And they've got barbs in their arms. So when you brush past, they catch onto your skin or your fur very, very efficiently. It's actually a very clever and efficient way of hunting, because what they do is they line the paths where humans and animals frequently go, because they can smell that's where we are. And they just sit and wait for us to brush past them. It's a very clever and effective way of hunting. It's a very energy efficient way of hunting. But for us, it's most definitely not appealing or beneficial. So we do always recommend that you try to stick to paths and try not to brush up against any overgrowth. And of course, I will say this 100 times throughout the presentation, so I hope you'll bear with me. Please do check yourself. And we recommend that you have a shower when you get home. And the reason for this is that if there are any ticks crawling on you, the water will wash them off. But please be aware, if a tick has bitten you, it will not wash the tick off. But if there are any crawling on you, it will wash them off you. And if you're anything like me, you immediately come home, get the dog and get the hose out and hose the dog down too, because dogs are massive carriers. So she doesn't appreciate it, but it definitely makes a big difference. And of course, always try and use a tick prevention on your pets and check them thoroughly for ticks. Apologies. So this is an example of the places that ticks like to migrate to. So under the hairline, in your elbows, behind your ears, your armpits, belly button, your waistline, your knees, particularly the back of your knees, in between your toes and your socks, and of course in your pets. And one of the ones which is missing, which I think is really important to also include, is the groin. Ticks do like to migrate to the groin. And I do a lot of events throughout the summer. And when I was at Belladrum a couple of years ago, there was a gentleman that was camping at part of the festival, and he came up to me absolutely mortified because he had a tick in that area. And he asked me to remove it. And it's safe to say that I gave him the equipment and the advice, and I let him do that himself. But it's something to be really conscious of, because ticks do like to go to that area. So once you're checking yourself, please don't neglect that as well. So yes, they're delightful little creatures, unfortunately. So it's really, really important when you're removing a tick that you do it correctly. So we always recommend that you never use your fingers to remove a tick. And the reason for that is because you're more likely to leave bits of the head of the tick still embedded. And not only that, but you're running the risk of squeezing the body, which means that you'll be pushing dirty blood back into your body. So we really encourage that you don't ever do that. It's also important that you don't use your normal average tweezers for removing a tick, for the exact same reason, the risk of squeezing the body and leaving bits of the tick embedded. And it's also really important that you never smother a tick. I don't know if you've seen on YouTube, there's videos of people putting peppermint oil or alcohol. A favorite one up here, putting whiskey on it. And I don't know why somebody would waste good whiskey, but you know, each their own. But it looks really effective if you see these videos on YouTube and on Facebook. Because within less than a minute, that tick has detached itself and is crawling away, and you think, great. But the problem is what you're doing is you're smothering the tick, you're drowning it, and you're making it panic. And when a tick panics, it will regurgitate its stomach contents, so vomit, which means it's going to be vomiting dirty blood back into your body. So although on these YouTube videos, it looks like a really effective way of removing a tick, it is actually one of the most dangerous ways. So please don't ever put anything on a tick. And that includes putting heat on it as well. I know it's quite popular to put a cigarette end or a lighter to the end of a tick, but again, you're stressing the tick, which means it's going to vomit. So you're actually increasing your risk. So please don't ever do that. So what we do recommend that you do is that you always use a tick removal tool. And these can be bought from vets, they can be bought online, they can be bought from outdoor shops. So we definitely recommend that you use these instead. And I'll show some examples in the next slide as we move on to it. And one of the things that's really important for you to be aware of is that there is no minimum attachment time required for a tick to be able to transfer an infection. So it used to be believed that you'd be safe if you'd removed a tick before 48 hours, then you couldn't get Lyme disease. And then the NHS changed that to 24 hours. And it's now been proven that there is no attachment time required before you can become infected. So all it takes is for a tick to come onto your skin, bite you, and drop off. And that could potentially be you infected. And one of the really interesting things about tick bites is that ticks have an anesthetic in their saliva, so you can't always feel them biting you, which is why it's really important for you to be vigilant in checking yourself. Quite often when you hear someone say that they had an itchy spot on their arm and when they looked they found a tick there, what's happened is the tick's actually paused in its feeding, and so it's not secreting the anesthetic saliva, and the area has become sensitive to the bite. But more often than not, that tick has dropped off before that person ever knows it's there, which is why it's really important to just every so often check yourself. So these are some of the examples of the tick removal tools. You can also get tick credit cards. Personally, for me, my go-to is the tick twister. And the reason for that is that I find it's the most successful in terms of removing the tick cleanly and without stressing the tick. And the reasons for that is it's like a two-pronged fork. And what you do is you slide it underneath the legs of the tick and you twist it until the tick comes away naturally. You don't ever pull or swipe at it, you just twist it. And by lifting the legs of the tick, what you're doing is removing that anchor. So the tick will use its legs to anchor itself in your skin. So by lifting those legs up, you're removing that anchor. And the twisting motion unscrews the barbs in the tick's mouth. So personally for me, I would always use a tick twister, but I know some people have quite a good knack of using the tweezers or using a tick credit card. But again, I think you have to have the knack. And for me, that's too much of a risk for me to want to take. So personally, I would always use the tick twisters. So diagnosing Lyme disease, as I'm sure many of you have possibly heard, is notoriously difficult. It took me over 5 years to be diagnosed with Lyme disease. And as a result of that, I actually spent 8 years of my life being housebound and bedbound. So it can be incredibly challenging. And that's one of the really important things, is to try and get that early diagnosis as soon as possible. Tick bites, as I said, are very easy to miss because of the size of the tick and also because they have an anesthetic in their saliva, which means that the bite itself is more often than not completely painless. Also, one of the really important things to be aware of is that not everybody will get a bullseye rash. If you do get a bullseye rash, that is a definitive sign that you have Lyme disease and you should go to the GP or A&E straight away to get antibiotics. But please be aware that not everybody will get a bullseye rash. I never had a bullseye rash. So although it's a really good diagnostic tool, you need to be conscious of that fact. And the other kind of early symptoms to watch out for are sort of a really severe summer flu, having really bad headaches, fatigue, swollen glands, joint pain, bone pain, extreme fatigue, both physically and mentally, and in children having behavioural changes as well. These are the sort of early symptoms to watch out for, and unfortunately, as time progresses, those symptoms become more severe in severity. And unfortunately, the blood tests are not accurate. This is why a lot of people end up being misdiagnosed, is because the doctors are relying on blood tests that aren't accurate. So although you might be tested and it comes back negative, that does not mean that you don't have Lyme disease. So that's something to be really, really conscious of. And the other really unfortunate thing where this is concerned is that there is no Lyme disease specialist within the NHS. So this here is what we call a bullseye rash. And as you can see, you've got the center dot, which is the site of the bite, and then the ring around it. And I was told by a specialist that the ring around it is actually the bacteria spreading out from the site of the bite. So that's why they kind of call it a bullseye rash, because that's kind of what it looks like. But you can get a lot of variations within that. And this here is an example of some of the variations that you can get with the different bullseye rash. Interestingly, up in the Highlands, a lot of people get what looks like a ringworm rash, which I find quite interesting. I get that reported to me when I'm out doing my events quite often. So there is variations within the rash, so it's something to be conscious and be aware of. And if you do ever get a rash like this, please do go to your GP and get antibiotics straight away, and don't be fobbed off with, we'll give you an appointment in 2 weeks' time, because that will be too late. So sometimes you do really have to push to be seen. And if that doesn't work, you are fully entitled to go to A&E in order to get those antibiotics, because it's not something that you want to delay. So the treatment for Lyme disease, as I said to you before, the early treatment provides the best chance for recovery. If you do get that early diagnosis and treatment, then for most people it can be eradicated quite easily from the body, which is why we always advocate for people to be conscious of the early signs and symptoms, the rash, and whether or not they've been bitten, because that early diagnosis can make such a big difference. Lyme disease doesn't have to be a big scary thing. We just need to get that early diagnosis and treatment in. And sorry, I've got a frog in my throat tonight. The MA rash is a diagnostic tool of Lyme disease, and treatment should be started immediately. But again, not everyone will get it. Your GP should be able to advise you on the antibiotics that you're needed, but for the majority of people, it will be doxycycline, and it will be around 3 weeks. And for children, it's generally amoxicillin. And a really good thing for you to be aware of, and please feel free to take a photo of the slide or to make a note of it, is the NICE guidelines. So the NICE guidelines outline what you are entitled to in order to treat Lyme disease, because unfortunately, a lot of doctors and GPs are not educated when it comes to Lyme disease, and they will often misprescribe, underprescribe, and often sometimes even refuse treatment. So if you are ever concerned, please do consult the NICE guidelines, because they outline what you are entitled to, and you can take those to your doctor, and hopefully then there will be less chance of any discrepancy in terms of treatment. And unfortunately, there's also no test to show whether or not you're cured of Lyme disease. We have a lot of research that's required into this illness, unfortunately, but hopefully that will come in time. So this here is just a bit of an overview in terms of the symptoms, and Lyme Disease UK paralleled that with COVID-19. I think a lot of you have potentially experienced having COVID. So it'll give you a bit of an overview into what it's like to have Lyme disease, but also the variety of symptoms that are in excess of the standard COVID symptoms as well. So there is a huge amount of symptoms, and unfortunately, because Lyme disease is such a intelligent bacteria, it does affect every single part of your body, both physically and neurologically. So these here are just some resources for you. Again, please do feel free to take a photo of this. It's a really good thing to have saved in your phone, so that if you do have any questions or have any queries, you can always refer back to it and look at those guidelines there. There's a whole heap of information. Lyme Disease UK have a wealth of information on their website. It also gives you the link to the NICE guidelines and the Royal College of GPs in terms of Lyme disease toolkits as well. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me today. I hope you have found it interesting, and I'll be more than happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Scary, but I think it's very encouraging that with early prevention, it's you got a good chance of everything being okay. So it's that doesn't make it seem so terrible. Let's see. Rebecca is asking, do all ages and sizes of ticks bite? So do the nymphs bite?
Yes, unfortunately, yes, they do.
Okay. And James Walker asks, what tick repellent brands do you recommend?
So the one I use personally is called Pyramid Product. They have ones that are for a whole host of different insects, but they have one that's specifically for ticks and mosquitoes, ticks and midges, sorry. And I really like it because it lasts for up to 12 hours, and it's sweat and splash resistant, which is what I really like, because being in the Highlands, we get a lot of wet weather. So
What are you calling it? Pyramid?
Pyramid Product.
Pyramid. Right.
Yes.
Pyramid. Sorry.
Pyramid, yes. Like the ancient Egypt pyramids.
Okay, thanks.
I really like that one. It's I use it a lot. I know a lot of runners who use it as well, and they say the difference between when they use it and don't use it is quite shocking. So it's my kind of go-to one that I go to, yeah.
Okay. Brendan. Brendan O'Callaghan.
No, Brendan, that's my husband's computer. I'm sorry I was late joining, but I couldn't find the lead to my computer. That's why. So I ended up going on my husband's. Sorry, I missed, because I was late, I missed the beginning of the presentation. And I just wondered, you've mentioned this as a product to prevent it. Had you mentioned any other ways that we can prevent,
Yeah.
get it to prevent as ticks, basically.
Yeah, I will bring the slide up for you.
Thank you. Can I?
Can you see that there?
I'm going to take a photo. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, please
Yeah,
do.
that's it. Prevention is better than cure. So I just wondered. Right. Thank you.
If you send me an email at sarah@swog.org.uk, I will be editing this together as a video and I can send it to you as well, so you can watch the whole
So it's,
presentation.
tell me again, Sarah.
Sarah with an H, SARAH at
Yep.
swog.org.uk.
Thank you.
And that
That's
goes for all of you as well. I can pass it on. But also you can look on the YouTube channel. And it will be
thank
there.
you.
It'll be there by this time tomorrow for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. So here we go. We've got some questions. Rebecca says, thank you for that info, even though it's made me feel itchy. Classic.
Sorry.
What is the prevalence around the UK, Northern Ireland in particular? Do you have these stats on the top of your head?
Do you know, that's a really good question. And to be honest, there's not enough research done for me to confidently pinpoint a number. There was a study done, it was a number of years ago now, in a woodland that estimated that per 1 meter of woodland there was 100 ticks. That study was quite a long time ago though, and we know the tick population has increased exponentially since then. But that's a really good question. It's one that I will go and see if I can find a more definitive answer on. I've certainly not been able to find anything so far, but if I do find something that gives me a definitive answer, I'll definitely get back to you on it.
Thank you. And then Melanie asks, how long can ticks live on your clothes?
On your clothes, ticks can live for a long time without food sustenance. I know actually some science teachers that collected ticks inside test tubes, and they've had them for over 5 years and they're still alive.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yes, I was quite horrified when I discovered that. In terms of scientific data to say how long they live for, there isn't really any studies done on that, so I can't give you a scientific answer, unfortunately. But I'm just sharing my experience when I was talking to the science teacher that yeah, she had a tick there for years because she took it out and she showed it to her students because she unfortunately had Lyme disease, so she liked to educate them on it, and she was horrified by how long this tick lived for within the test tube.
Be right back, everyone. I'm just going to go and buy some pyramid products.
I know, it's horrible. They're absolutely horrible.
Well, it's plenty of horrible things, though. We can't bury our heads, can we? Bury out, to use a tick style pun. But we've got to educate ourselves. Jonathan asked a question, and I didn't want to ask it, but I thought this: does it matter which direction you unscrew a tick with a tick twister?
With the tick twister, no. No, not with the tick twister. I know in terms of tweezers they say to do it anti-clockwise, but in terms of the tick twisters, no, there's no difference.
Okay. Thanks for asking that, Jonathan, because I would have wondered. Mary, I read that ticks can jump via electrostatic attraction. Do you recommend wearing natural fibres to help prevent this?
That's a really good question, and unfortunately, there's not scientific data to be able to confidently for me to give you an answer because we just don't have the data on it. But yeah, it was really interesting. I read quite a lot about it in terms of the static and the way that because ticks can't fly and they can't jump, all they can do is crawl. But I found it really interesting that the research was suggesting that they could use the static to basically fling themselves onto you, which I found horrifying but also fascinating. And again, I don't think there would be much of a difference in terms of the style of clothing. What I think would be important was to wear repellent. But again, we don't have the research, unfortunately, for me to be able to give a scientific answer on that. Sorry.
No, don't apologise. Don't apologise. Thank you though. And Mary's put my email address in there for everyone in the chat. Any other repellents? Does eating garlic work? Oh, I can answer this one. I think that's for vampires.
I know some people make up their own sort of natural remedy in terms of some people use a lot of garlic, some people use a lot of different herbs and things. Personally, I don't feel that using garlic would be strong enough to repel tick on its own. I think it would definitely help, but I don't think you'd have to consume so much of it to be able to use it as a repellent that I think it would possibly give you quite an upset stomach. So I wouldn't personally recommend it. I just think ticks are so, they're so vicious and they're so cunning and they're so intelligent that I wouldn't personally put my faith in a natural repellent. I think you'd need something a wee bit stronger, which I know is not always something people are comfortable with because it is chemicals. But the likes of Pyramid Product, they've got DEET free ones and they've got DEET ones, so you do have an option to use more heavy duty versus a lighter kind of repellent. So there are options out there.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Anthony Mills asks, he says, thank you. Are there any ways to mitigate the long-term effects of Borrelia? Oh, I don't want to say the Latin. How do you say it?
Borrelia, oh, now I can't say it. Borrelia burgdorferi.
Yeah, that.
It's a bit of a mouthful. So in terms of if you're not diagnosed early and quickly, I'm very much talking from my own experience here, is that I've been undergoing around 12 years of private medical treatment to kind of get me to where I am today, which is thankfully a lot better than where I was, but I've still got a very long way to go. And the majority of my treatment has been very heavy duty, long-term antibiotics, and that's been intramuscular injections, pulsed antibiotics. I've also taken a selection of herbs and supplements as well to try and support my body to recover itself, to try and protect my organs, my brain function, and so forth. I also do things like oxygen therapy, infrared therapy, these kind of different things to just try and keep the disease under control. But generally for most people in terms of long-term treatment, it is very heavy and extreme doses of antibiotic treatment.
Right. Wow, it sounds like you've been on quite the journey. So what will you drop me an email with the name of your book, because we can pop it in our newsletter. I think we'd all be interested in having a look at that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. So Francis asks, what job do they do in ecology? What's the sort of the raison d'etre for the tick? Is it just as a vector for?
How do you mean? Sorry, do you mean in the ecosystem?
Oh, right. I suppose
play?
that's what Francis means. Yeah.
I wasn't too sure. Sorry. It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, is my honest answer. I've not really been able to find a purpose for them. I believe everything in nature has a purpose, has a reason, but I've not really been able to find a particular purpose that ticks play. I know they are a food source for the likes of chickens. So for instance, I keep chickens in my back garden because I'm paranoid about ticks and I know they'll eat them. And I know that ladybirds will eat tick eggs as well. So they are a food source to the environment, but I'm not really entirely sure whatever purpose they play.
You know, when toxins are in a food chain, and as it goes up, it can get more concentrated. Does the bacteria wouldn't become more concentrated up the food chain? They wouldn't work like that, would it? My mind's going wild now. Like, no.
Again, it'd be a really interesting question to have an answer to, but there's not the research there to be able to say. Sorry.
No, fair play. I'm putting you on the spotlight here. Do the repellents kill the ticks and other insects, or just repel them? That's a general question.
So the repellents are generally, well, they're repellents. They try and detract the tick from coming onto you, and they don't actually kill them. For instance, for your pets, I use something called NexGard, which is a tablet I get from the vet, and I give it to the dog every month, and it's a repellent but also kills the tick. So one of the things to be conscious of is a lot of the spot-ons, they will take up to 40 hours to kill the tick, by which time the tick could have dropped off into your carpet or your couch. So it's something to be conscious of, whereas the NexGard, I find, kills them within a couple of hours of them attaching. I find it really good, and it does reduce the number of ticks that my dog gets. So unfortunately, in terms of humans, it generally tends to just be a repellent. There's also another one that just came into my head called Mozziguard, which is also they've got a tick repellent line as well. So yeah, please do have a look and check them out.
Okay, thank you. So we're asking, is Lyme disease curable if you don't get antibiotics immediately?
It's a really interesting one because it very much depends on the individual person and their situation. So for me, because I was left undiagnosed for such a long time, the reality is that I will have this for the rest of my life, and it's just a case of trying to control it and manage it and try to claw back as much as I can. For some people, though, some people aren't as badly as affected. My case was quite extreme. I was housebound, bedbound for over 8 years, so my case was extreme. Some people aren't as badly affected, and they do make a full recovery despite having had it a long time. And it also depends on co-infections. So what co-infections you have, if you have any, how many you have, and these kind of elements. So there's not a straight answer to that question, unfortunately. It very much depends on the individual person and what they've experienced and what co-infections they potentially have.
Was it Avril Lavigne? Did she have it?
Yes, yeah, she did.
She was bedbound for, was it like 5 years? I remember reading about that.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob Jones asked, do thermocell work as a repellent? Are they like do they like give out a frequency that it discourages mosquitoes? Is that what, Rob, is that what you're talking about?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
No, it's a little gas-powered thermal thing that you wear on your belt, or I've used for camping for years. And there's an impregnated pad that goes on, and basically the gas heats up this pad, a metal pad, which then you put the pad is impregnated with various repellents. I just wondered, because I've used them for years, whether they've actually that you've ever come across them, whether you've aware if they work. But they work really well for midges and mosquitoes for keeping them away, because effectively it works for about a 10-foot radius. But
All right, thank you, Rob. Have you heard of these?
No, I've actually not heard of them before. That's really interesting. I'll need to go and look them up because that sounds incredibly intriguing. I know you can get it's like a keyring. You can clip it onto your waistband and it emits a frequency which is meant to deter the ticks. But I don't know how effective they actually are.
I'll drop a link to the Amazon one that I just happened to have found when I was getting it. But I said I've used it for years, and you buy these little pads, these are little fabric pads that you slide in, and the gas you get little gas refills from like cigarette lighters, and what it does is it heats up a pad and it runs for about 8 to 10 hours. And it basically just puts in there. I'm a field archer, so I'm always out in woods, and I'm always in undergrowth finding lost arrows from basically different people. So I've used these for years and for camping, and fortunately, touch wood, he says touching it, I've not had a tick on me, but I didn't know whether it's just luck more than anything else.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that would be really interesting to get a link to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
I know there's some. Yeah, I know there's some research at the moment that's going into looking at different blood types, because there's some evidence to show that ticks are attracted to certain blood groups versus other ones, a bit like mosquitoes. So there could be a little bit of that coming into play as well. But it'd be really interesting to have a look at the tool that you're talking about and have a look at it. Thank you.
Yeah. James Walker asks, in a broadleaf woodland with no grass, etc., on the forest floor, where might ticks live? If you sleep in hammocks along that are off the floor between trees away from grasses, can they climb up trees and along hammock lines? So I suppose you've answered that by they're quite sedentary predators and they wait. Is that?
Yeah. So they'll be in the leaf litter. Even if though there's no grass, they'll be in the leaf litter. And they certainly can climb up the likes of trees. I know there was some researchers saying that ticks couldn't climb up trees and things, but I've seen them climb up the pole for my washing line. So they definitely can. climb up various things, and I would imagine climbing up a tree bark would be much easier than climbing up a metal pole. So I would say yes to the answer to that. They could definitely be climbing up the tree and then climbing along the wire to your hammock. But it's definitely better option than sleeping on the ground, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know it's not Brendan. It's Brendan's computer. Brendan's wife, I believe, asks, is there a spray for the grass that would repel them from an area? Is there anything that you could do to cover the area that you're in?
Unfortunately, not. You could take the tick repellent that you use on yourself and spray it on the ground around where you are, but you would need an absolutely massive bottle to cover any area of significance. Unfortunately, yeah, there's not anything bigger
Yet.
than
There's nothing been developed
nothing
yet.
yet. Yes, nothing yet.
One webinar at a time, eh? CV asks, I'm afraid it's running late, but don't worry, I will record it and I'll send it along. And it will be, if I don't send it, it can be sent. You can look on our YouTube on the SWOG and you can find it there. Anthony comments that, yeah, heavy duty long-term antibiotics have their own problems, of course, but it's the lesser of two evils, I guess, in this scenario. Badgers will find and eat out tick nests. Okay. Well, so I suppose they do serve their part in the ecosystem if they're a badger snack. Where do you apply the repellent? Clothes and your body? Which parts of your body? All exposed skin?
Yeah, so I do both my clothes and my skin. I mean, I would always look at the label and just double check, because obviously different tick repellents have got different criteria. But the one that I use it on both my skin and on my clothes. Just be careful not to get it in your eyes, and try not to get it around your mouth, because it does not taste good. So
Oh,
that
okay. Okay, and so then Anthony reminds us that it's not just deer that carry ticks. He's saying his wife works at a nursery, a children's nursery with a fully enclosed garden, and the children kept getting ticks, and they also carried on small mammals and birds. Okay.
Yes, the average bird carries 2.5 ticks. So they're a massive carrier. Hedgehogs, mice, essentially any animal can carry ticks. So although deer are definitely a very they're very much categorized as being the enemy in terms of being big tick carriers, any animal can carry ticks, and any animal can then transfer that into your garden or your play area for your kids. So yeah.
Loads of things hitch a ride on a hedgehog, don't they? It's
Yeah.
So Rob's pops the info in the chat, everybody, for the Thermacell, just the name of it. Some people, Francis asks, are some people more prone to getting Lyme disease? Over the last 40 years, I've had more than 30 bites and no obvious symptoms, I suppose.
So not all ticks carry Lyme disease, but what we do know is that an increasing number of them do carry Lyme disease. So there could be the fact that you're just very, very lucky. It could be that you have a higher natural immunity to Lyme disease, or that it's dormant in your system. So for some people, they can be bitten and not affected until 10, 20 years later, when something happens in your immune system and the Lyme disease becomes triggered to become active. So the Lyme disease can become dormant. And that's kind of what we're aspiring to in terms of my treatment, is to get the disease to go dormant within my body. But I'm very conscious that if I get another infection, it could rear its head again. So you might just be very, very lucky, and I very much hope that you are, but it can lie dormant in your system as well. So it's something to be conscious of.
Okay. And Peter asks the final question. Would planting wild garlic repel ticks from an area? And I suppose if they didn't like the smell, I suppose it might help.
So it's a difficult one. There's not a huge amount in terms of plants that deter ticks. There's actually, I think, a section on Lyme Disease UK's website which is about your garden and how to use it to repel ticks. So for instance, line the edges of your garden with gravel. that helps the deter ticks, so they don't like to climb over it. I think they've also got a list of some plants that you can grow that ticks don't like. For instance, I plant lavender around the borders of my garden.
Okay.
Well, from the research that I read, the ticks didn't like lavender. So there are some plants. So I would definitely go and recommend having a look on LDUK's website just to familiarize yourself with some of those plants.
Okay, yeah. I'd rather it smell like lavender than garlic, to be honest.
I haven't heard of garlic being used as one, but if I find any research on it, I'll definitely be back in touch and let you know.
Okay, thank you. And then I suppose, James asks, what proportion of ticks do carry Lyme disease? So you say they don't all carry it. I suppose we're fearful that they all do, but do you have the stats for that?
So off the top of my head, I don't, unfortunately.
Not a problem.
I'm not gonna lie, I've got a little bit of Lyme brain and I can't actually remember the figure off the top of my head. But what I can do is go and find out, and I can email it to you, and you can include it into the newsletter if that was helpful to you. Would that be
But it's
okay?
best to act, if you see one, it's best to just act as if you're dealing with, it's like a deal with it as if it were anyway, so.
Yeah, it's always better to err on the side of caution, especially if you're starting to present with any rashes or irritation at the site of the bite, or you start to develop any of the early signs and symptoms. I am kicking my own brain for not being able to remember that, because I literally looked it up the other day to remind myself.
Don't worry, we don't want you to be a human
check.
Google. Don't worry, you're here to educate us. We don't need numbers from you as well. That's fine. So please, could you share your slide again with the details of your websites and whatnot, just so the rest of us can have a look?
Absolutely. I'll pull that up here for you. Oh, I think it's gonna.
Okay, let's get that.
Let's see if I can get it up for you.
Yeah, we could see, even if you just do it without the sharing, and you just pop. There we go. Thank you so much. Well, Mary, we can have a little section in the newsletter about this, can't we? I know she'll be nodding. She'll just be on mute.
Yes, of course, we'll share information as a follow-up.
Great, thank you. And we'll link to the what are we in now? April. In the May the 1st newsletter, we'll have the link to the YouTube as well.
That'd be perfect, because May is Lyme Disease Awareness Month, so that's perfect timing.
Oh wow, so that's by chance, not by planning, but we'll say it's by planning. Thank you so much. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time and meeting with me beforehand to sort all of this. And it's been very informative. And although it's not the most pleasant topic in the world, it's definitely forewarned is forearmed. And you've taken the time to really educate us properly. And we will share with our families and loved ones and via the newsletter. If you have any resources, especially for Lyme Disease Awareness Month, if you'd like to email them to me, I will share them on our social media, and I'll speak to the Woodlands people as well, and we'll get them shared there too, and we'll cross post for each other.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you so much.
No,
thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll work together again in the future. And thank you, everybody in SWOG, for constantly supporting the SWOG community and joining. And if you have any ideas for any webinars that you would like, please email me at sarah@swog.org.uk. Remember to follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram and Twitter, or whichever one is your preference. And just keep supporting us, and we'll keep on keeping on. Thank you so much. And special thanks to Morven-May. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night. Cheerio, everyone. Enjoy your tea. Ta-ta.